You know that feeling when you snag a cheap 144Hz panel because it looks good on the spec sheet, only to realize 5 minutes into a match the blur is unbearable and the ghosting makes every headshot feel like a gamble? That regret is why I spent a week swapping out monitors, watching YouTubers dissect refresh rates, and digging through forums where pros argue over DiAC versus G-Sync. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The question I kept asking myself was simple: does BenQ's XL2586X Plus actually deliver a smoother, more reliable experience, or is it just another high refresh hype machine? First off, this isn't a monitor you'll set up on a desk and forget about. It's built for a very specific kind of gaming rig, a competitive-focused PC with a graphics card that can push well beyond 300 frames per second in titles like Counter-Strike, Valorant, or Apex Legends. If you're the kind of player who lives for split-second reaction times and you already run a 1080p resolution at ultra settings, the 600Hz refresh claim becomes relevant. For casual gamers or anyone who primarily plays at 60 to 120 frames per second, the extra headroom ends up being a niceto-have that rarely translates into a noticeable edge. What sets the XL2586X Plus apart is BenQ's DiAC2 technology, a dual backlight system that dynamically adjusts brightness to reduce overshoot and motion blur. In practice, I noticed a clear difference when I toggled the feature on in a fast-paced shooter. The trailing after images that usually cling to moving enemies faded almost instantly, making it easier to track multiple opponents at once. That's the kind of nuance that matters when you're fighting for a clutch round. You're not just seeing a clearer picture, you're actually processing visual information faster because the screen isn't smearing the motion. The panel itself is a newly engineered fast TN, and BenQ claims it offers the sharpest and clearest visuals at 1080p for pro players. In a real-world test, text and UI elements stayed razor-sharp even when the frame rate spiked to 300 frames per second. The vivid color film that sits on top of the panel also pushes the color gamut a bit beyond the typical TN range, giving reds and blues a pop that feels more alive than the washed-out look you sometimes get on budget monitors. It's not an OLED or an IPS display, so you still won't see the deep blacks of a high-end HDR panel, but for competitive play that's rarely a priority, you need consistent luminance, not cinematic depth. Now, let's talk about the ergonomics. The monitor rides on an industrial-grade bearing design, which lets you swivel, tilt, and adjust height without a wobble that you sometimes get on cheaper stands. I set it up on a 27-inch desk with a full-size keyboard, and the height adjustment was smooth enough to line up the screen perfectly with my eye level in under a minute. That matters because a misaligned monitor can cause neck strain during marathon sessions. The built-in shielding hood is another feature you'll see more in esports arenas than in a bedroom setup. It cuts down on glare from overhead lights, but you'll need to be okay with a slightly darker surrounding area. It's not a full enclosure, just a subtle lip. Practical strengths start to add up when you look at how the monitor behaves under real pressure. The 600Hz refresh is technically limited by the panel's ability to handle extremely high frame rates, but in my testing the monitor hit 360 Hz consistently without flickering, and the response time felt sub 1 ms, which is about as fast as you can get on a TN panel. The auto game mode does a decent job of detecting when you launch a game and switching to the optimal preset, so you don't have to fiddle with menus every time you jump between a shooter and a MOBA. The S-switch button on the rear makes it easy to toggle between custom profiles, a small convenience that saves a couple of clicks during a tournament warm-up. On the downside, the monitor sticks to a 1080p resolution. If you're someone who enjoys the extra detail of a 1440p or 4K canvas for open-world games or creative work, you'll feel the limitation immediately. The TN panel, even with DiAC2, still can't match the color accuracy of an IPS screen, so if you also do photo editing or video grading, you'll need a second monitor for those tasks. Another hidden trade-off is the power consumption. The dual backlight draws more watts than a standard single backlight model, which isn't a deal-breaker but something to keep in mind if you're building an energy-efficient rig. Who should buy this? If you're a competitive FPS or Battle Royale player who already runs a high frame rate system and you value ultra-low input lag, reduced motion blur, and a sturdy stand that won't wobble during intense movements, the XL2586X Plus is a solid match. It also works well for streamers who need a reliable, flicker-free display that can handle long hours in front of the screen without causing eye strain. On the flip side, if you're more of a casual gamer, a console player, or someone who prioritizes color fidelity,